Lake Victoria has a spectacular view from some vantage points, and these have attracted affluent residential areas with little planned effluent disposal system. Lake Victoria is not only the biggest provider of fish protein in Uganda, but it is also the economic nerve of East Africa, supporting over 30 million people. It is also an employment provider. For example, in Chiindi landing site alone, there are over 2,400 fishermen directly employed.
Landing site is in 3 sections. We have one section for Nile perch, section for tilapia, and section for silverfish. So the section you are seeing down here is for silverfish. This section we have 600 boats. This 600 boats, each boat has like 4 people, and that's around 2,400 employment.
Many other people are indirectly employed by the Lake Victoria fish industry. This includes fishmongers, transporters, processors, and others. Being the biggest water reservoir for the River Nile means that it holds a lifeline for countries that are downstream, such as Sudan and Egypt, who depend on the Nile. Pollution of Lake Victoria is real, has been persistent over many years, and is worsening with time, threatening environmental health, water-based organisms, and services. Dr. Lucas Sindaula was part of a research team that worked in Maxon Bay on pollution.
The Machizon Bay is one of those bays which are lying adjacent to Kampala city, and the point where we are is where the Nakivubo channel enters Machizon Bay. If you look at this water here, you can see that it is an intense brown color. Now the Nakivubo channel traverses various areas of Kampala and collects wastewaters from industries, from homes, from slums, and from everywhere. And all that stuff is brought and emptied into the lake at this point.
Critical pollution levels were first reported by studies carried out in the early 1980s. In addition to pollution, high fishing pressure, habitat change such as removal of natural shoreline vegetation, growing crops in shoreline wetlands, invasive species like Nile perch and water hyacinth, and climate change are threats to Lake Victoria. A fisherman gives his experience of habitat disturbance and its impacts on fishing.
Wane mabega wange wemulaba wanene walingawo amazzi n'ekitoogo kireringa mu kirengere eddako ne bagera ne bayiwawo ettaka nga waliwo n'ekitoogo abatuuze kwali bayimiridde emmere yaabwe bamwakiwuyako ekyatambula bayiwa ettaka eryo ne bakiyiwako ekitundu ekisigala mu mazzi ekitundu ekyasigala mu mazzi ne gajjula eno era ekitundu ekikutukako olw'ettaka liri ebayiwako kubanga wonona tewali mu mazzi ng'ate sayidi eri ndala naye nga tewonona kitoogo kyalibadde kiri mu mazzi lino ttaka kuva eri ku kugundi ku lwerwe waggulu mazzi gano gali mawanvu ng'otega n'ofuna ebyennyanja naye kati gayimpa nga tewakyali byennyanja.
Common pollution sources include inappropriate disposal of urban wastes such as garbage, sewage, industrial effluents, atmospheric deposition from burning of fossil fuels, mining, and quarrying. Some activities that seem to be ordinary, such as excessive use of detergents when washing dishes, clothes, cars and motorcycles, excessive application of agrochemicals, and cultivation are the real killer sources of pollution. These have contributed to excessive nutrients and other pollutants in near-shore areas of the lake, leading to undesirable conditions, including overgrowth of blue-green algae. In addition to other organic matter, any surplus algae that does not go into the food chain decomposes, a process which depletes dissolved oxygen, endangering organisms in water and occasionally causing fish kills. When pollution levels surpass internationally accepted standards in the lake, major economic sectors are affected, including fisheries, purification of domestic water, hydropower generation, recreation, and tourism.
The biggest selling point of Uganda is its nature, and the water bodies are a part of that. However, pollution actually kills that, reducing the potential for recreational tourism.
Excessive nutrients drive rapid growth and spread of water hyacinth, thus affecting water transport, fish production, and exploitation. For example, at Buvumbo Sanya landing site in Mpigi district, if the water hyacinth is not regularly removed using this crane, there is a shutdown of the whole landing site, affecting livelihoods. If pollution is not addressed, Lake Victoria is in danger of becoming the world's largest pool of dead water, endangering the well-being of over 30 million people in East Africa and beyond, who depend on the fishing industry, domestic and industrial water, hydropower generation, water transport, irrigation, and others. In order to increase awareness and guide management interventions, the National Fisheries Resources Research Institute, NaFIRRI, supported by World Bank through Lake Victoria Environment Management Project LVEMPII, undertook research to determine levels of pollution in the lake and impacts on living organisms. NaFIRRI scientists collected and analyzed information for 2 years from areas in northern Lake Victoria, including those adjacent to agriculture hinterlands. A study area map showing one as Maxon Bay receiving NaFIRRI channel from Kampala City, 2 as Napoleon Gulf adjacent to Gingertown, 3 as Bunjako Bay, which receives River Katonga in Mpigi district, 4 as Buckley Bay receiving River Sio in Busia district, 5 as Kagera area receiving River Kagera in Rakai district, 6 as Huntington Bay in Mayuge district, and 7 as Sese Islands in Kalangala district. Results show that parts of the lake adjacent to large towns which harbor motor garages, car washing bays, industries, and sites draining agricultural hinterlands through rivers had high levels of metal pollutants, with some exceeding internationally acceptable levels.
Heavy metals occur naturally in the environment, but there are levels beyond which they are considered undesirable and become of concern to living things and public health. We measured levels of selected heavy metals in sediments in the sites and compared them to thresholds for lake sediments by Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations.
Lead levels were beyond the threshold in Maxon Bay and Napoleon Gulf, the only areas where it was detected. Copper was beyond the threshold in Maxon Bay and Kalangala. Iron was beyond the threshold in Bunjaku and Barkley Bays. Zinc was beyond the threshold in Maxon Bay, Bunjaku Bay, and Kalangala. The levels of nickel and manganese were found to be below the threshold. Sources of heavy metals into sediments include effluents from industries, urban centers, and landfills, runoff from farmlands, and atmospheric deposition. Through periodic mixing of some parts of the lake, bottom feeding behavior of some organisms, and activities such as sand mining that disturb the lake bottom, the metal pollutants are brought back to the water and under favorable conditions become more available to organisms through the food chain. At elevated levels, these heavy metals can negatively affect organisms, for instance, by impairing growth and reproduction, causing damage to organs and mortality, especially in young stages, with cascading impacts to the fish industry and human users of water resources. Already, deformities have been observed in mouth parts of the young of lake flies, indicating a polluted environment.
Give me another one.
Nickel and manganese were found to be below the threshold. Lead levels were beyond the threshold in Maxon Bay and Napoleon Gulf, the only areas where we detected it. Copper was beyond the threshold in Maxon Bay and Kalangala. Iron was beyond the threshold in Punjako and Bakele Bays. Zinc was beyond the threshold in Maxon Bay, Punjako Bay, and Kalangala. It was observed that sites adjacent to the big towns and those draining agricultural hindrance through rivers have the highest levels of most of these heavy metals. Even where the levels are not beyond the threshold, these levels are increasing compared to historical records in parts of the lake.
Just as heavy metals, nutrient pollutants are also major players in the story of pollution in Lake Victoria. These mainly come from industrial and urban effluents, agriculture and domestic wastes from settlements close to the lake. Sites receiving urban effluents and agricultural wastes through river inflows were found to have high levels of nutrient pollutants of nitrogen and phosphorus origin. For example, Punjako, which receives effluents from Katonga Basin, which is under intensive agriculture, and from urban centers such as Masaka and Lukaya towns, through River Katonga, had the highest levels of phosphorus. Semi-closed bays such as Barkley and Hannington, with limited water exchange, had higher levels of nutrient pollution than open ones such as Kagera and Kalangala, where the impacts may have been diminished by dilution effects from wind action. High concentrations of nitrogen and phosphorus lead to overgrowth of algae, which reduces water clarity and oxygen that fish and other aquatic life need to survive. For instance, Maxon and Punjako Bays, which had the highest concentration of phosphorus, had the highest algal biomass. Water clarity in all sites showed a decline, especially in near-shore areas, compared to historical levels of 2000 and 2001. Low water clarity interferes with the ability of fish to reproduce. Fish use visual displays to attract their mates during courtship. However, with reduced water clarity, this behavior is interfered with. That is not all. The increasing concentration of pollutants in the lake also affect other resident organisms and humans who depend on the resource. Aquatic organisms such as copepods, cladocerans, and rotifers form an important food for fish. Among these, copepods, which had the highest relative abundance at all sites, were reduced in the most polluted Maxon and Punjako Bays. Pollution-sensitive insects such as mayflies and caddisflies occurred in very low abundance in the most polluted bays such as Maxon Bay, while pollution-tolerant invertebrates, especially oligochaetes and bloodworms, occurred in very high abundance. With reduced oxygen in the lake as a result of organic pollution, fishes that feed at the surface of lake sediments, such as Nile perch, whose young stages feed on caridina shrimps, have started being food limited. This limitation is greater, especially in the deeper areas, as the preferred prey occurs in low oxygen areas, while its predator, the Nile perch, prefers highly oxygenated water. Such a scenario denies Nile perch access to its key food, caridina shrimps that now abundantly occur in low oxygenated waters. Just like in earlier studies, pollution has been shown to affect fish species diversity and abundance, with increased pollution leading to increased algal biomass, reduced dissolved oxygen and water clarity, coupled with increasing fishing pressure. It is inevitable that fish productivity and production will be reduced. Eventually, community livelihoods and general well-being of fishing communities, food security, income, and GDP are negatively affected. For example, several fish processing factories have closed around Lake Victoria, and those that have remained operational are operating below capacity. The dirty linen of pollution is not limited to fisheries. Pollution brings along disease-causing vectors such as bilharzia snail, malaria-causing mosquitoes, which make lakeside communities more vulnerable to waterborne diseases. Despite these and other effects of pollution to the riparian communities and the country at large, there is still hope. Together we can reduce pollution and its associated negative impacts on the environment. It is our duty to take the necessary steps to save Lake Victoria for the now and future generations, given its socio-economic importance. Through research, management strategies that can be undertaken to prevent further deterioration of the lake in order to sustain the well-being of the population have been suggested. Management measures should include proper and safe disposal of domestic and industrial effluent is crucial. Interaction with officials of the National Water and Sewage Corporation revealed that while the majority of households in Jinja Central were connected to the sewage system, most factories were not, and these were letting untreated effluent into the lake.
As you can see, most of the factories which are around, they are discharging.
With the expansion of the treatment plant by LVEMPII, the defaulting factories should be encouraged to channel their effluents through sewage system.
This is the place where we collect our wastes in the whole Jinja.
The wetland around Jinja West Treatment Plant has been greatly encroached upon by the nearby community growing crops. Wetlands around sewage plants need to be jealously protected to enable maximum performance of the waste filtering functions. Wetland destruction for growing rice, yams, sugar canes, and excessive papyrus harvesting for roofing houses and making crafts reduces capacity of the wetland to perform its function of filtering incoming effluents. Therefore, protection and restoration of fringing wetlands is crucial. The law on the 200-meter buffer zone should be rigorously enforced to discourage the current tendency of constructing and farming along the edge of the lake. Waste dumping sites in towns should be upgraded to sort and use organic wastes for manure. Jinja Municipal Council dumping site at Masese is a good example for the proposed waste management. Control and use of fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides in lakeside commercial farmlands should be regularized. Toilets and other sanitary facilities at fish landing sites should be commensurate to the population for proper waste disposal and minimal contamination of adjacent waters. Ecological friendly control of water weeds should continue through the use of biological and mechanical methods. For example, at Katosi landing site, breeding of weevils that feed on water hyacinth is a good example of a biological method being implemented. Control bush and other organic burning in the lake catchment area. Establish compulsory pollution levy to all polluting industries. Raising awareness about pollution and its impacts through schools, radio and TV interactive talk shows, cinema, billboards, and social media. Fortunately, many of the strategies being suggested are covered by existing policies, which when enforced can promote management of pollution. Lake Victoria is the second largest freshwater lake in the world, providing livelihood to over 30 million people. If we do not change our habits, the consequences of everyday pollution will drastically affect the natural state of the lake and eventually lead to limited benefit from it. As we exploit the resources, let us do it without harming the balance of nature. Our forefathers left us a great resource, Lake Victoria. Let us also leave a great resource to the future generation.